Hey everybody, this is State Representative Ken Gordon and welcome to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. Today we're going to have a little bit different format. I'm here with Rich Hosford of BCAT, News Director, and we're going to have a conversation about sort of life in the legislature for your state rep, me, in this session which I serve as the House Chair of the Joint Committee for Public Service, among other things that I'm doing. And rather than engage in a monologue, which is hard for me to do, except maybe I've gotten used to it. I'd rather have a conversation with Rich about some of the questions that would come to mind to you on behalf of the viewers here in Burlington and in Bedford, because we share this show with Bedford, and we'll have a little bit of a conversation about what's been going on in the legislature from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to talk about just sort of, the trajectory to, how long you've been, the chair of the Committee on Public Service, right. And, just kind of your kind of overarching views of sort of the roles and responsibilities of the committee. Sure.
So this is my first session as chair of the Joint Committee on Public Service, or as chair of anything. I was the vice chair in the last session on the Joint Committee for Economic Development. Mm-hmm. So I'm really I'm really enjoying this role and responsibility of chairing a committee. When we say it's a joint committee, because the Senate is part of this committee in the legislature, most of our committees are joint with the Senate. People might be used to seeing the U.S. Congress, where they have House committees, right, and Senate committees. So they take witnesses to testify to the same thing twice. When it comes to the policy committees, we generally combine that, and then we can talk about what happens to bills and as a result of that, because we're looking at it collectively. So I have been chair for about a year now, as the calendar goes. In other words, this session started last January, but it takes some time for the speaker, in this case, our new speaker, Speaker Ron Mariano, made the decisions as to how he wanted to organize. And he asked me to chair this committee. We deal with the subject of public employment pensions, public employment healthcare, and civil service.
Okay. Seems to be up your alley.
Yeah, so these are, and as Rich knows, the reason is that I'm an employment lawyer by trade. I've been doing that for decades, and so this deals with retired employees for the most part, except for public employees when it comes to civil service. Those would be, active employees. But yeah, we have a very large number of bills, about 500, in fact 499.
Really?
That were assigned to us, right. So our job is to take all of these bills, kind of organize them, have hearings on them. Everyone is entitled to come in and testify about them. And then once we have hearings on all of the bills, then we decide, essentially, do we refer them off to another, either to the floor, either the House or the Senate, or do we refer them to another committee? Sometimes, very often, that committee would be Ways and Means.
Just to look at the financials of them.
Correct. So we're looking at the policy behind these bills, and then if there's a financial implication to them, if they cost money, then we'll send them to Ways and Means to determine what those costs are, although we look at the cost too. And I really think it's important that we not ignore what the cost of a program would be, and we do that.
And what are some of examples? I know there's 499. We can't get to them all, but just to give people a little bit of the flavor of what kind of bill we're talking about here.
Yes. So we have categories really, and we can talk about those categories. So, and in fact, one category that we look at the cost of, we'll start with that, is that public employees are classified in groups for their pensions. So certain groups of public employees, like police officers, are treated differently than other groups, which would be, say, office workers. Those are kind of the two extremes. So you don't have to work as long as a police officer to qualify to fully vest in your retirement package. Because, as a society, we think there's a whole lot of stress that is involved in policing, firefighting, things like that. Then that's different from someone who's working in a municipal office.
Sure.
They both qualify for a pension, or for a legislator for that matter. We're aligned with the office worker because it's not as stressful as someone who's saving a life, for example, right? So what happens is that many groups will come in and ask to be reclassified. They'll say our group classification is too low because group 1 is the one that is the starting point, and we want to be reclassified higher. So we have groups that come in like harbor masters. We have animal control officers are an example of some of those that you might imagine. They're saying, you know what, we're confronted with, actually we're saving people too.
Yeah.
Right? Or we're in a dangerous situation ourselves. And so we should be hired. That's one group. What we did there, when we go into the cost analysis, is that we've had a rule, and I've enforced this rule and announced that it's being enforced, that if any group wants to come in and ask to be reclassified, you have to tell us what is the expense to the Commonwealth to do that.
So it kind of puts the burden on them to sort of do that research and get that information available.
Yeah, so we've told them you've got to go to the actuaries that are involved with the state and tell us, okay, what's it going to do? And the reason for that is, it's a little bit in the weeds, but our pension system is what's called a defined benefit plan, which means that you're entitled to a certain amount of money based on the amount of years that you've worked and your age, as opposed to an employer depositing money into an account and they contribute into your fund, and then whatever the market bears is what you're going to get when you retire. That's called a defined contribution plan. So if it's a defined benefit plan, it would mean that if the market crashes and the interest rates are the return on investment is very low, then the state's going to have to come in.
Oh, okay.
And make good on that, right? Because we have a promise to our workers. Because of that, right, we want to know with these group classifications, what will it do? And if we don't have it, we can't send it to another committee. We can't send it to Ways and Means. We have to do what's called sending it to study, which is we'll just keep looking at it, but we can't advance it on its way toward the floor. Again, I think it's the responsible thing to do, and I've had to tell certain groups that have good reasons why their jobs involve a danger that might otherwise have been taken into account.
Right.
But the reason is because we don't have this study and we need you to do it. So that's one group of bills that we have. We have another group of bills that people believe that we should prevent our public investors, the boards that manage this money, from investing in certain investments that they think are undesirable. For example, fossil fuels. Or they look into a foreign government, and say we shouldn't be investing in that foreign government because they're doing things that are against our values. The person promoting this, what they would like to see. These are all good ideas too, but we need to see, okay, so how about the retired person who says fossil fuels don't really bother me?
Right, and if it's going to add more to the eventual return, then we want to keep them in there.
Right. They're going to say that there's nothing, you're playing with my money now,
right.
Really. Despite what I said about defined benefit, which means you'll get your money. But, sort of theoretically, that is what we're doing. And so, we looked into, is this the right tool? Even if we all agree, or even if I agree, that the use of fossil fuels should be discouraged, is this the way to address the problem? Or is the way to address the problem what we did earlier in this session by passing a bill that will create an incentive to stop using fossil fuels directly? Pass an incentive to start using more renewable energy directly, as opposed to this. Is it the right tool? So that's what we looked at here. So that's another group. We have people who said, well, coming out of COVID, we think that we should get a bump in our pensions because this has been tremendously stressful for us. We're nearing retirement anyway. We want to get access to retirement a little bit sooner.
Right.
So they're asking us to therefore bump up their pension because of their contribution. And that's another category of, it's a good idea. I wouldn't deny, we had many, many witnesses come and tell their story of working through the pandemic. And it was essential that people were working.
Right. I mean, if you have to go into an office, I guess everybody could have said, the last couple of years have been somewhat, at least, hazardous conditions.
Yeah.
Just being in a public place.
Yeah. And if you were, say, a healthcare worker and you were working in proximity to people who you knew were sick, if you were a teacher, there was a bill that addressed teachers, and they had to relearn teaching during this time because they were teaching remotely in a way that many teachers just never expected they would be called on to do.
Right.
When you think about those teachers teaching young children, it's hard enough.
Oh yeah,
to get the attention
we talked to
of
a few of them.
kids. Right. Okay. So they're saying, you know what, this just isn't what I signed up for, right? Now what we had to do was look at the cost of those programs. Okay, let's start with good idea, but then our committee now has to look at what's it going to cost to do this, because all of our resources are limited. So if we direct cost into one program, it won't go into another. And so what we did with one of these bills was we sent that bill to study, because that's the one that would have the cost would have been paid by the taxpayers, what we call the general fund.
Right.
Right. And what we looked at was maybe the better way to address this would have been to create a program of direct payment, hazard pay, to some of the workers who were, for example, out working exposed to the virus during the time that many of us could stay at home. The reasons being that the pension increase, or what we might even call early retirement, would help some people, those people nearing retirement, but wouldn't help that younger worker who might be an EMT.
Right. Who will still work through the same hazardous conditions, but isn't going to have access to a pension anytime soon.
Right. So it wouldn't matter to that person. So it was essentially unfair, I thought, to use public dollars to benefit one group of people, which would be the older worker through this crisis, and not the younger worker. So we came out with a bill dealing with ARPA funding, federal funding, because where we're going to get the money anyway. So we do have access to federal funds in this session, and we provided a direct benefit to those workers between $500 and $2,000. It depends on how many people are in the pool. Mm-hmm. We'll figure out how much money we have to divide, and then how much each worker would get.
Okay. Sorry, so we got those two categories of bills. I just kind of want to back up and do a little schoolhouse rock with you for a second.
Sure.
Because, you mentioned we have 499 bills assigned to the committee. What's the process that gets a bill assigned to a committee? Is it just, somebody writes it and they want to sort of, get the ball rolling, or is it coming from other committees all the time? What's sort of the background of how it kind of the flow of from how a bill kind of gets made?
Right. So I think there's a song from Schoolhouse Rock about this, right? I'm just a bill, something like that.
But anyway, Capitol Hill.
It's on Capitol Hill. That's right. Showing my age anyway, right? I guess. What happens is that so someone will file a bill, and then sometimes it's because the representative or senator has the idea about the bill that's behind it, or sometimes a constituent comes to us and says, I have an idea, and it's a good idea, and we'll file that bill. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's an organization that says, for example, the ACLU, that says we have an idea, and we're looking to have someone champion this bill. So for one of those three ways, we file it. Generally, that happens early in the session. We have a deadline about 2 or 3 weeks from the beginning of the session. So everybody's been thinking about what they're going to do. And then January comes along. They all go filed, and they go to the clerk, the House clerk, or if you're a senator, the Senate clerk. And the clerk will decide what topic is, what's the principal topic of this bill. And they'll assign it to a committee.
Okay.
At the same time, the Speaker of the House on our side, or the Senate President, is organizing the committees, assigning chairs and vice chairs. And so we then, having been placed there, receive this package of bills. Some of you in Burlington know my staff director, Cody Case, a Burlington resident. He actually is in Somerville now, but he and 4 others that we have on our staff really are responsible to then take that organization, those 499 bills that we have, and then subdivide it into topics, like the ones I was saying, and then so that we can have some semblance of order when we do our hearings. So they come to committee, we hear them, we decide what to do with them, and we have a deadline there as well. And it's early in the second year of the session. This year it was February 2nd. Okay. So by February 2nd, we had to decide what to do with all of them. And our choices are we can refer them out to the floor or to, say, Ways and Means, so another committee that needs to look at it. Or we can decide, you know what, it's a good idea, but we better keep looking at it. We're not ready to refer it out. That would be, say, for example, something that doesn't have a financial impact statement on it. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It means we can't refer it out yet. It's not ready.
It's not ready.
Right. We can also say this is really a bad idea.
Sure.
We didn't do that because there's really no need. We can just keep studying it until the end of the session, really. But we can do that too. So, or what we can do is we can extend a bill. We can extend that deadline if we have a reason to do that. We did that. I'll give you an example. There was one COVID early retirement bill pertaining to teachers that was very popular. And we had real reservations because the teachers were going to be paying the cost of this bill themselves, according to the proposal. It's called a buyback. Okay. So they'll put a certain amount of money into the pension system to buy back time toward their pension benefit, right? Mm-hmm. I think that the drafters of the bill were envisioning it. The cost would be something like when someone leaves the military and they become a teacher, they can buy back the years up to 4 for their military service, so that when they eventually retire, those years they don't have to. They can work a little less.
Right. Okay.
Count their military service, but they still have to pay, and that's 11%. They would pay 11% of each year of an annual salary for each year they want to buy back, because 11% is what would have been deducted for their pension contribution anyway.
Okay.
But as an actuary might tell us, I don't want to go down. I'm not an actuary, but if you think about it, if you're going to retire next month, and you have a certain amount of money to put into that retirement system, it doesn't have the advantage of accruing value over time. So it's not going to be 11% deposit to start getting your pension right away.
Okay.
For that reason, this program was going to be more expensive than I think the drafters of this bill thought it was going to be.
Right. More expensive for the people who are supposed to benefit.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So just shortly before that Rule 10, what we call Rule 10 deadline, Joint Rule 10, which is the February 2nd deadline, the proponents of the bill came to us and said, we have another thought. We have another way of addressing this. And I thought it's significant enough that, okay, let's extend that deadline so we can look at your new idea and see if that works out better. So we did that. We also have, along with our committee, and this is indirectly an answer to your question, but we have a commission that was formed out of the police reform bill from 2018. And that commission is tasked to look at our civil service laws.
Right. I do know we wanted to get to the civil service. So.
Yeah. And so what we did, so quickly I'll go back to your question and then go up to civil service. So what we did was we had a number of bills from municipalities that want to leave civil service as a department. And we extended that because at the same time we have those requests, our commission is looking at ways in which we might be able to reform our civil service laws to make it more usable for the municipalities, to correct some problems before a municipality might want to leave. Mm-hmm. So let's give our commission a chance to figure out what we can do.
All right. So it's like you have two different things happening at once. You have, municipalities coming and saying, we want to maybe get out of civil service, or, not use it, but you're like, well, give us a little time we might address the issues that the concerns that you have right now.
Correct. Correct. So this commission it's made up of 29 commissioners, 29 people who were assigned either directly by name within their role within, for example, the administration, or by title. So the chair, the House and Senate chair of Public Service, we are members of the commission, and we are the co-chairs.
Okay.
And it's been my pleasure to work with my friend from Brockton, who is the Senate co-chair of the committee and the commission, Mike Brady. So we've together organized a lot of this. But the 29 other members represent, for example, we have the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, the police unions, the fire unions. We have members of the ACLU. We have other civil rights groups, the local organization of the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Attorney General's designee. We have the governor's designee. A few other legislators are on there, 5 total. Among those legislators are the chair of the Black and Latino Caucus by title.
Right. Okay.
And things like that. So we bring together, we have the Mass Municipal Association, that's the organization of the municipalities that advocates for their concerns, also has a seat as one of the commissioners. So we bring together all the different voices. And together we're tasked with, again, addressing what can we do. We held 10 hearings so far. They're all public. They're all on the website. So if you go to malegislature.gov and you go to committees and commissions and you'll find us.
All right.
And you'll find the video of all of our hearings, and you'll find documents that we've seen as a commission we share publicly. The deadline for our report to come out is the end of March, the end of next month. And I expect that we'll have some recommendations that will make this better.
Yeah, and I think, so we went from like how the bill gets made, and we want to pivot now, I guess, to talking about like some of what you and maybe other people on the commission view as some of the, the issues with civil service as it stands right now. So maybe we should back up a little bit, because I'm not sure that everybody watching necessarily knows exactly what we're talking about.
Let's talk about civil service. We'll go back to sort of Schoolhouse Rock for civil service.
Exactly.
Okay. So back in the 30s, Massachusetts established its civil service laws because the complaint then was that especially among police officers and firefighters, there was a lot of patronage. People were getting their jobs in municipalities because they knew somebody.
Right.
And we were trying to create more fairness for these municipal jobs, these town and city jobs. So what we did was we said, okay, everyone will take a test. Now most of the towns and cities opted in because they had access to this test. Everybody got the same one. So if there's anything wrong with the test, it wasn't the fault of the municipality. They couldn't be held responsible or liable even for giving an unfair or biased test. And then, so for hiring, they'd said, okay, there's a test, and then we're going to look at some of our values as a Commonwealth. One thing we value is service in the military. So everyone will get a score on the test, and then everyone will get a preference or an extra couple of points if you're a veteran. If you're a disabled veteran, you get more of a preference. If you're a child of a police or firefighter who died in the line of service, you get a preference, and things like that. There was a the towns were able to also put in a residence preference because they said we still want to have local people.
Right.
So
that's always a big thing with hiring, especially it seems like in police and fire departments. They like to have residents and local people.
Yeah, it's nice to have people who are familiar with your community.
Right.
So that comes into play. So all of these preferences make it so that it's both fair to everybody, but also when you think about it, it also restricts the choices for the municipality because this list comes to them and they'll get the top people on the list and that's who they are and you've got to go through. And you don't have to hire the number 1 or 2 or 3 person on the list, but you at least need a reason why you pass them by, right?
Okay.
Over time, many municipalities, Burlington being one of them, found that some of these were just too cumbersome, and they wanted more flexibility. and understandably so. One problem that we found in the commission is that whatever the system, access to labor has become very difficult.
True.
So there are fewer people taking the test. There are people in certain minority areas that don't know of the test, that aren't interested in taking the test, mostly through education. Mostly they're just unfamiliar and they don't take the opportunity to do it. And what we're finding is that I think the biggest complaint when they're saying, well, this is too cumbersome, this system makes it too long to get someone through and hired, a lot of it is because we don't have enough people taking it, applying for it. And so we'll be looking at incentives. For example, through our community colleges, we can increase the number of programs available to people who want to get into policing, firefighting, things like that. And creating educational incentives that used to exist but aren't there anymore. So we can look into that. Another thing that civil service does that's really very important is that it provides a place to go to appeal a decision on, for example, promotion or discipline. We heard from a lot of police officers and firefighters saying, I feel good that if something happens, if a decision is made, say on discipline, and I think it's unfair, I think someone's playing favorites, I can appeal it. First I have to go through the municipality, just like private people would go through their employer first. But if I'm dissatisfied, if I think that this was treated, if this was unfair, I can eventually go to the Civil Service Commission where they will look at it more objectively than the same entity that made the decision in the first place. And so that's a right that workers have that I think is very important to the worker.
Yeah.
That really can't be replicated by the municipalities outside of civil service because there's nowhere for them to go. So we're looking at ways in which we can preserve, some, if not just improve this system, rather than see this flight out of it.
Yeah, so you'd prefer to see municipalities stay with it and, kind of allow you guys to work out some of the issues, perhaps, and address them that way rather than have them, leave the program.
Well, the questions that we're supposed to answer, that we're tasked to answer from the bill that formed this commission are, how can we do it? Can we, and if so, how can we do it? So it really isn't up to us to say this is good, this is bad. It's up to us to provide some guidance as to how we can improve. And so it's interesting work, and it's interesting because at each of these hearings, we do have questions coming in from these different points of view. And we've heard presentations from all of these points of view as well. So getting everybody together to agree on one answer, on one set of recommendations, will be hard. But that's our job. So
because it's not always the sticking point?
It doesn't have to be easy. It just has to be done.
Right.
So we'll get it done.
Getting the different points of views together.
Right.
All right. I know we're coming up on the end of time, but we have a couple more minutes. So I guess just other kind of highlights from recent things that I know ARPA has been a big thing, the American Rescue Plan Act. A lot of funds coming through the federal government. You had a release somewhat recently with some local COVID tests and masks and things being available. Anything else that people might be interested to know? Yeah,
I'm really excited about that bill because it's going to really help us statewide with respect to some of the equipment that we need and some of what the school needs and things like that on a statewide basis. But also locally, our voice was really heard. We have, together with Senator Friedman, we have a number of places where our local interests will benefit. And I know that I think like you said, you've seen the press releases and run some of the stories, but the Burlington People Helping People, which provides food for people who are food insecure, will get $100,000. In Bedford, the Bedford Food Pantry will also get $100,000. The Chamber of Commerce in Burlington is getting $150,000, and that was really important to me because our small businesses have really struggled because, first of all, the people weren't shopping, they weren't going out of their home, the restaurants were closed, and And the challenge, we've seen restaurant after restaurant leaving.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's been so difficult. And I thought one way that we could help by using a smaller, well, $150,000 isn't a small money, but using a pot of money and get the most out of it that we can, is a better way to say it, was to help the chamber help the businesses. And I know that, you know, in talking to the folks at the chamber, that's what they've told us, is we could communicate opportunities to our businesses, but our businesses can't afford to participate with us anymore.
Right. I know. They stopped charging dues for a while, I'm pretty sure.
They stopped charging dues, and then they had to lay off their president, who's been Rick Parker, who's been here on their shows over and over. He's back now with them, and they've had to cut back. So this allows them some financial flexibility now, so they can continue to do their work, and then bring in businesses that might not be able to afford the dues right now. When they weren't paying it, and now they don't have to, just to get them over this hump. So they shouldn't really have to take, and where are they going to get the money? If these businesses aren't paying dues, how are they going to pay staff, for example? What are they going to do?
I mean, their normal fundraisers are usually, you know, group events, and those are, you know, getting back to normal, but they're not there yet.
They're not there yet, and you know that you've covered those events, so you've been there, your viewers have seen them. And it's been a couple of years since.
Oh yeah, we haven't had a black tie gala in a while.
Right. Well, I guess we could go on. Maybe we could have a part 2 of this discussion. I mean, we should. But we've reached the end of our time here on Rapping with the Rep. Rich, it's great to talk to you and really get folks caught up on some of the things going on in Beacon Hill, and specifically your representatives on Beacon Hill and what we're doing. So. Folks, thank you very much for joining in with Rapping with the Rep. I'm State Representative Ken Gordon. I'm here with Rich Hosford. Thank you. See you next time on Rapping with the Rep.